She is one of Hollywood's most powerful women. Yet behind the cameras, Angelina Jolie is preparing for a life-changing move. Reports confirm she is getting ready to sell her legendary Los Angeles mansion, the same home once owned by Cecil B. DeMille. Why? Because as soon as her youngest twins turn 80 next year, Angelina plans to leave America for good. Where will she go? Some say Cambodia, the land where her eldest son Maddox was born and where she owns a vast sanctuary. Others whisper about Europe, and some even speculate Canada. And while Angelina stays silent, her children, especially Maddox, remain closely tied to Cambodia, spending months there to study its culture and roots. This is not just a move. It's the beginning of a new chapter for Angelina Jolie, far away from Hollywood lights, closer to the life she truly calls home. The lights of Hollywood once crowned them as its golden couple, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Together they weren't just actors, they were a symbol of beauty, love, and family. But behind the glamour, behind the red carpets and flashing cameras, something was breaking. In September 2016, Angelina Jolie filed for divorce. The world gasped. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the fall of Brangelina, the couple who seemed untouchable. For years, the tabloids speculated, was it Brad's drinking? Was it Angelina's overwhelming independence? Was it the clash of two powerful souls who simply could not breathe in the same space anymore? But the truth? The real truth stayed hidden because Brad stayed silent. He never lashed out. He never threw blame. He never fought back in the media. Instead, he carried the weight quietly, and that silence spoke louder than any headline. The divorce was messy. Custody battles stretched across years, lawyers replaced family dinners, courtrooms replaced laughter, and 6 children caught in the storm. Maddox, who once clung to Brad's shoulders as a boy, drifted away, hurt by conflicts too deep to heal quickly. Shiloh, torn between 2 parents she adored. Zahara, Pox, Knox, and Vivian, watching their home split into pieces. And Brad kept his silence, until finally, years later, the silence broke. In an interview, his voice shook, his eyes heavy with regret. He admitted what many suspected. "I drank too much," he whispered. "I let myself fall apart. And in the process, I hurt the people I loved most." It wasn't anger, it wasn't accusation, it was confession. A man looking back at the ruins of his own choices. He spoke of sobriety, of long nights wrestling with his demons. He spoke of being present, of rebuilding trust with his children, one fragile step at a time. And he spoke of Angelina not as an enemy, but as the mother of their children. "She gave me a family," he said softly, "and for that I will always be grateful." For the first time, the mask of Hollywood perfection was gone. What remained was Brad, the man, flawed, human. The world listened in silence, because these weren't the words of a movie star. These were the words of a father, of a husband who lost, and of a man learning to heal. The story of Brad and Angelina may never be written with a happy ending, but in Brad's first emotional words, there was no hate, there was honesty, there was pain, and above all, there was hope. Hope that broken families can still find light. Hope that silence, once broken, can open doors to healing. And hope that even in the ruins of love, there can be peace. Pause. This was Brad's voice. Not the actor, not the star, but the man, finally breaking his silence. They were once Hollywood's golden couple. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, Brangelina, the love story that the world admired, envied, and obsessed over. But behind the flashing cameras and red carpet smiles, cracks had already begun to form. And those cracks would one day split into a canyon that neither of them could ever cross again. It did not start with the divorce papers in 2016. It began quietly, almost invisibly, years earlier. Angelina was deeply devoted to her humanitarian work, traveling to refugee camps, meeting women and children displaced by war, dedicating herself to causes bigger than Hollywood. Brad admired her at first, but admiration slowly turned into distance. He wanted her home. She wanted the world. And jealousy, that silent poison, began creeping in. Then came the clashes over the children. 6 lives at the center of their universe, yet 6 very different journeys. Maddox, adopted from Cambodia, had grown fiercely loyal to his mother. Zahara from Ethiopia was Angelina's shadow. Shiloh, their biological daughter, struggled quietly in the middle, often torn between them. Brad wanted more structure, a grounded family life. Angelina wanted freedom, exploration, to let the children grow as global citizens. What the world saw as a picture-perfect family was, behind closed doors, an ongoing tug-of-war. And then there was the vineyard, Chateau Miraval, their French paradise, their wedding venue, their dream of a family-owned wine business, but that vineyard became a battlefield. Decisions about ownership, investments, and power turned into accusations and bitterness. It was not just about money, it was about control, about trust. Angelina believed Brad was too consumed by it. Brad believed Angelina wanted to cut him out. What once symbolized their love became the symbol of its destruction. Their arguments grew louder, sharper. Friends whispered about the tension. Brad's struggles with drinking worsened the rift. Angelina, who had fought her own health battles after the BRCA1 gene test and preventive surgeries, now found herself asking him late at night, "Why are you drinking so much? Why are you choosing this instead of us?" His silence was her answer. Her tears were his reflection. By the time 2016 came, the public only saw the explosion. The headlines of their split, the fight on the plane that changed everything, the custody battles, the lawsuits, the endless speculation. But the truth, the hidden reasons, was that love had slowly turned into resentment, dreams had turned into disagreements, and a vineyard full of wine had turned into a factory of bitterness. Hollywood lost its favorite couple, but Brad and Angelina lost something even greater, the promise they once whispered to each other, that nothing and no one would come between them. And yet, everything did. They were never just Hollywood's most famous kids. They were the reason 2 of the world's biggest stars called themselves a family. 6 children, 6 journeys, woven into one home. It began in 2002. Angelina Jolie was not yet with Brad Pitt. She was already known for her wild life, but also her growing humanitarian heart. That year, while filming in Cambodia, she met a child who would change everything. His name was Maddox. Just 7 months old, left in an orphanage after the violence of war had left scars on his country. Angelina adopted him. She was only 27 and she became a mother, alone. That was the first heartbeat of the Jolie Pitt family. 2 years later, in 2005, Angelina visited Ethiopia. There, she met Zahara, a baby girl who was sick, suffering from malnutrition and in need of urgent care. Angelina brought her home, against a wave of headlines that questioned her choices. But when Brad entered Angelina's life, he too stepped in, not just as a partner, but as a father. Together they refiled adoption papers. Maddox and Zahara were no longer just Angelina's children. They became Jolie Pitts. Then came Shiloh. 2006, Namibia. The world was obsessed. For the first time, the couple chose to have a biological child, far from Hollywood, far from flashing cameras. Shiloh was born in a small African hospital, surrounded by secrecy and security, the first biological Jolie Pitt child, but never the only one to be loved. 2007 brought another chapter. Vietnam. Angelina adopted Paxtheen, a shy little boy who had spent years in an orphanage after being abandoned as a newborn. At first, Pax struggled with the noise of fame, the cameras, the chaos. But in Brad and Angelina's home, he found siblings who understood what it meant to be rescued, chosen, and held. Then, 2008, France. The twins arrived. Knox and Vivian, born in a seaside hospital in Nice under the eyes of the entire world. They were biological, yet Brad and Angelina insisted there was no difference. Each child, adopted or biological, carried equal weight, equal love. 6 children, 6 nations. Cambodia, Ethiopia, Namibia, Vietnam, France, America. The family looked less like a Hollywood dynasty and more like a small United Nations. But behind the glamour, the stories weren't always easy. Maddox grew protective of his mother, especially when conflicts with Brad turned loud. Zahara became Angelina's shadow, her closest confidant. Shiloh, the world's first celebrity baby, grew up under headlines, struggling to define identity beyond her parents' fame. Pax remained the quiet one, hiding from cameras but strong inside the family. And the twins, still young, carried the weight of a home that was breaking apart. When the divorce hit, it wasn't just Brad and Angelina. It was the children, the center of it all, who felt the cracks most deeply. Custody battles, courtrooms, therapy sessions. 6 young hearts caught in between. Yet, despite it all, the children remained the only true bridge between Brad and Angelina. Because no matter the anger, the jealousy, or the silence, one truth cannot be erased. They built this family together. And today, every time Maddox speaks in Korean at his university in Seoul, or Zahara walks proudly at Spelman College, or Shiloh dances her way through viral clips, the story continues. It is not the story of fame. It is the story of children who came from different corners of the earth, but grew under one roof. The Jolie Pitt children. The beginning, the middle, and perhaps the only lasting legacy of a love that the world once believed would never end. She was one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood, a superstar with red carpets at her feet. And yet, Angelina Jolie chose to walk down paths filled not with cameras, but with dust, hunger, and silence. When the lights of fame burned brightest, she stepped into the shadows of refugee camps. It all began in 2001. Angelina was filming in Cambodia, a country scarred by war and poverty. She met children who had nothing, no shoes, no homes, no protection, and something inside her shifted forever. She later said, "I could not close my eyes anymore. I could not pretend that I had not seen." That was the moment when Hollywood's Angelina began turning into the United Nations Angelina, In 2001, she became a Goodwill Ambassador for UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And from that day forward, she traveled not to premieres, but to war zones. Pause, Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Sierra Leone, Darfur, Yemen. The list is long and painful. Imagine this. Angelina Jolie, one of the highest paid actresses in the world, sleeping on the floor of refugee tents, eating whatever the families ate, listening to mothers who had lost everything, holding children who had seen war before they saw school. The year was 2024. Nearly 8 years had passed since the world's most glamorous couple Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie announced their shocking split. What followed was not just a divorce. It was a war. A war fought not only in courtrooms, but in headlines, in whispers, in the hearts of 6 children caught in the crossfire. The world thought it was finally over when the settlement was signed. Papers sealed. Signatures inked. The media called it closure. But inside the hearts of Brad and Angelina, closure was far from reality. The divorce dragged on for years. At its center, custody. Who would raise the children? Who would they live with? What would family even mean after love had turned into bitterness? Angelina stood firm. She wanted full custody, claiming stability was her children's greatest need. Brad fought, insisting he deserved to remain a present father. Each hearing was a new wound, a fresh headline. But in 2024, something shifted. The lawyers reached an agreement. The financial matters were finally divided properties. Businesses and even the vineyard in France that once symbolized their love, now a reminder of betrayal and battles. Custody was set, with Angelina holding primary care, and Brad allowed visitation, a compromise forged through exhaustion more than peace. The paper said final. The media said closure. But could there ever be closure when trust was shattered, when accusations had been carved into memory, when a family had been broken in front of the world? For Brad, the settlement was a bitter relief. He had fought for his children, and in the end, accepted less than he wanted. He admitted privately that the battle had scarred him. His drinking, his nights alone, his struggles with identity, these were not healed by ink on paper. For Angelina, the end of the legal fight was not the end of her fight as a mother. She carried her decisions heavily, the surgery she endured to fight cancer risks, the war zones she stepped into, and now the courtroom wars she survived. Each scar, whether on her body or her heart, was a reminder that survival often looks nothing like victory. And for the children, now teenagers, some already adults, the word final settlement meant little. They had grown up in the shadow of fame and conflict. They carried their own scars, shaped by whispers they overheard, stories they read, silences they felt between two people who once defined love. 2024 was the year the paperwork ended, but the truth is, a family is never closed by signatures. Scars don't disappear with settlements. They remain quiet, invisible, but always there. Brad and Angelina's story did not end in 2012. It transformed. From love to pain to a fragile coexistence bound by children. And though the world may remember them as Hollywood's golden couple turned tragedy, the truth is simpler and far sadder. Two people, once deeply in love, now forever tied by the echoes of what they built and what they broke. Closure came on paper, but in their hearts, the battle lives on. They were once the golden couple of Hollywood. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, two of the most beautiful faces in the world, who seemed to have everything: love, children, fame, power. Yet behind closed doors, their story was never just about fairy tale romance. It was about choices, sacrifices, and the heavy price of being human. Their love built a family that crossed continents. They gave voices to children who had none. They turned their spotlight into a beacon for causes bigger than themselves. And yet, their pain was just as public: the court battles, the accusations, the silence that still echoes. For Angelina, it became about survival, health, and her mission for humanity. For Brad, it became about redemption, healing, and confronting his own demons. Together they left a mark not just in Hollywood, but in how the world saw love, struggle, and broken dreams. Because their story was never just theirs, It belonged to everyone who believed in second chances, in building bridges, in the power of family, no matter how unconventional. And yet the question lingers, was this a story of destiny or of downfall? Was it love that failed them, or was it the weight of the world they carried? Their legacy is not simple. It is a reminder that even the brightest stars burn with shadows, that even legends bleed, and that sometimes love is not enough to save two people, but it can still change the world around them. So, what do you think? Who carries more of the responsibility, Brad with his demons or Angelina with her silence? Or was it simply the clash of two powerful lives that could not exist under the same sky? Because in the end, the legacy of Brad and Angelina is not just about love or pain. It is about the fragile, complicated truth of being human.